All right, well, welcome back. I'm here with my friends Ginny and Jim and Jeff, and we're going to be talking about the last assumption and why it's wrong. And the assumption is Jesus is for kids. And in a sense, the assumption is wrong, but it's not wrong. Jesus is for kids, but it's kind of this idea that he's only for kids. And maybe the best way to set up this conversation is, why might we think that God is irrelevant to me as an adult?
I think God's irrelevant as an adult, or I could be led to believe that, because as an adult, we're trained to grow up. Mm-hmm. We're trained to take on more responsibility. We are trained to carry a greater burden. We're trained to basically be the adults. And in doing that, we tend to become more self-reliant. We tend to look to our own strengths and our gifts, even gifts God has given us. Mm-hmm. We tend to look toward those. And we walk away from Jesus and who he intended us to be. The idea that we were ever meant to be anything but God's children would not be scriptural. Yes, we're supposed to grow up, but we're always supposed to remain his children. Mm-hmm. So in a very real sense, Jesus is for children. We just never abandon that childhood. Yeah. We think we do, but we don't. And when we think we've abandoned our childhood, Jesus tends to become irrelevant.
I think in my life too, I have believed in Jesus since I was really little, since I was a kid. And when you're a kid, you're fed a lot of information, which is good. Your parents teach you what they believe is true, which is what parents should do. And so there's a part of that where you're accepting information. But the thing about Jesus is that he's meant for us to have a relationship with him. And so until I stop just accepting information and start actually having a relationship with Jesus, he will be kind of irrelevant to me because I don't know him. I see him as this one-dimensional person of this information that's been fed to me. And so, until I start engaging Jesus as an actual person and not just a character, then I'm not going to start understanding that he holds relevance, that a relationship with him is relevant.
I think if you're taught as a child that Jesus is like a magical wizard or like a genie that just grants wishes, or that kind of idea of Jesus, really just a basic, simplistic Jesus, then you really won't have the correct mindset in adulthood, and you won't view God and Jesus as the depth that really is required, and to really even have a little bit of a handle of who he is. And so I think, that can definitely, change how you view Jesus as an adult. If all you see growing up is someone who can just grant wishes, or someone who's just a make-believe,
Yeah, it almost seems like I can outgrow Jesus, or like you were saying, grow up. And if we maybe are even churched and go to church and understand Jesus as a kid, we eventually become old enough where we start asking questions and maybe even doubts enter in. And if we don't land on that, he becomes like someone we don't need. And so what does it look like as even a Christian? And my false assumption is that God's irrelevant to me. How would I even interact with God? What would be the terms of that relationship?
I mean, if you come from a point where you just don't believe that Jesus has more to offer than just being a magical wizard or genie or something and grant wishes, or if you look at Jesus as someone who is just really simple and basic, and you don't need him as an adult, you're not going to embrace him. I mean, you're not going to chase after him, and you're not going to want to live your life for him. You're really going to live your life for yourself, and you're not going to rely on anyone but yourself, and it's really going to lead in areas that probably aren't the best.
So you'll push God out and you'll say, I'm self-sufficient. I can handle this on my own.
Yeah, or even just if we assume that Jesus is only for kids, that he is actually irrelevant to our lives, we just ignore him.
I think sometimes I feel like a God like that who's just for kids can seem a little outdated. That like I finally have grown up and, I've realized that was a nice story, but, and it would have been great at a time in my life or maybe even a time in history, but now, maybe it's not so important today.
Doesn't really apply.
There's like this picture that maybe we get from, maybe it's the Sunday school Jesus or just the pictures or something, I don't know, but that he's just kind of like soft and weak, or that Jesus is kind of like a nanny or a grandma or something. But that's not at all an accurate picture of him. We know that he is a strong and powerful a God. And how would you say that God has been powerful in my own life?
I think for me, you just need a little bit of history on me. I've been a firefighter for 38 years, and I've seen a lot of stuff. And there have been times when I have had to rely on God and have had to take him into battle with me. And he comes through. And when you see God come through in dark places like that, your confidence soars. Your confidence in him, not your confidence in yourself, but your confidence in him soars. When he gives you courage, and I've had this happen to me many times, when he gives you courage that you don't actually have, I mean, you can't even muster it up, and yet all of a sudden, there it is, and you know it's from him, your confidence soars, and he becomes a God who is for every situation, not just the ones you can't handle, but every situation. You begin to realize if he could come through in that one, then I should give him a shot at this one, even though I think I can handle it. So,
I think in my life, finding him, in the terms of finding him relevant, whenever I've gone through really hard times, like times that have been really grieving, for me, usually losing a relationship is like excruciating. But it's been so cool to watch when I've invited Jesus and invited God into that process of grieving. And I've watched him work on my heart and kind of set me free from mentalities and mindsets that I had before. And like, I've always really struggled with fear. And so losing relationships, there's always been fear, like, what if this ends? What am I going to do? It's going to hurt so bad, and it does hurt so bad, and it totally sucks. But watching God set me free from those fears because of losing something, and seeing myself get free from that and go, well, I'm not really afraid to end up alone anymore, because I know that God has everything that I need in himself and in the people that he surrounded me with. So, well, what if it never happens? Well, it never happens. I'm still going to be okay. And God, like you were saying, God has proven himself faithful to me. And not just faithful to me, but he, through the pain that I've gone through, he's saying, look what's been keeping you trapped inside of yourself. I'm going to break that off if you let me. And like, through that pain, I'm going to break off whatever was holding on to you. And you're going to be able to be a stronger person and a more confident person and a more free person. And to me, that makes me excited. Not that I really want to go through more pain, but I'm like, man, if God has more freedom for me on the other side of pain, I'm all about that. That's like exciting. And then you also get to know God better. And that's exciting too.
I think everyone experiences pain at some time in life, and even just regular anxiousness and stress. And instead of seeing Jesus as a powerful way to live in that and to have peace in that, we see him as like a limitation, or he's just going to make it worse, or what really could he do? How could he show up? And and if we view him as weak, really, what could he do if he's just a weak God? Well, if I can't outgrow my relationship with God, if I can't become too much of an adult that I don't need Jesus anymore, what does it look like to continue on in a relationship with him? What should I expect that relationship with him to look like as an adult?
Tag, you're it.
Right. So one thing I've really kind of learned over the past couple of years is that when I try to do things on my own, it doesn't really work out. And I learned real quickly that God has like a better path and a better plan for my life. And when I engage him and I engage that, it's really amazing what he provides. There have been times when I've been out of work and, I've relied on God and, he's provided, or I have been going through a difficult time and I go to God and he provides. I mean, he encourages you. He brings others along to encourage you. And so when you really engage and plug into God, he comes right alongside you and supports you and helps you and brings other people to help and support you.
The longer I have a relationship with God, what should I expect out of that? How should I expect it to transform and change?
This is going to sound weird, because I know I said the one that grows up and accepts more responsibility and more burden. But Jesus said in the Bible that we should always come to him as children. So there's an aspect of my relationship with God that will never change, and that will be that I will always be his child. I'm not going to be his adult someday, his go-to person. He's always going to be the one that I rely on.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more I realize that the things that that I taught my children, that I thought I was teaching them, and that weren't necessarily for me, are actually for me. It's like, well, I don't get to back out on that. If it's actually good for them, it's actually good for me. God is very consistent. So for me, it's just remembering that I'm always a child of God, and that Jesus is always the Jesus for children, because I'll never be anything but a child. And my reliance on him should be childlike.
When I think about not outgrowing my relationship with God, I think about that there's always going to be more of God to get to know. So, yeah, so when you think about the universe itself, the universe which God created, right? The universe is, we can't even like find the end of the universe yet. And we have telescopes that we can look through. It's expanding, it's going away from the telescope. So the telescope can't even keep up to see the whole universe. We can't see the edges of the universe. And how much bigger is God even than the universe? And so just to think about that, as much as we can't see the end of the universe, we're always going to be able to discover new things about who God is, because he's even more vast than the universe. And then also, we can't even know ourselves fully. And so a relationship with God is a two-way street. God's going to continue to show us things about ourselves our whole lives. Us human beings are so complex and so deep that's exciting to me, that I'm never going to stop learning about like new things about God, and I'm never going to stop learning new things about myself, because God ultimately knows us better than we could ever know ourselves. So,
yeah. I think that we even just see in natural friendships and relationships that, the more time we spend with someone, it's not that we eventually outgrow it, it's that it actually goes deeper and it matures. There's more intimacy to be had there. Mm-hmm. And I think we miss out on that when we think that Jesus is just for kids, and that he becomes irrelevant when we're adults. And actually, if we would sustain that relationship and keep pursuing him, we would actually find ourselves in a deeper, more meaningful relationship with him than one that's hit a cap or a ceiling. Well, thanks for being with us and sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate you guys sharing all your insights on this assumption.